There are moments in your life that don't just scar you, they rewire you. I remember the exact minute everything changed. It was 5:12 p.m. on a rainy Tuesday, and I was in the car with my daughter, Olivia, waiting outside the therapist's office. My wife, Amy, was inside for what was supposed to be an individual session. She had insisted we do couples counseling after a year of growing tension. We weren't in a full-blown crisis, not yet, but we'd started speaking in sharp tones. We'd stopped laughing in the kitchen. Our daughter would pause before walking into the room like she was testing the water before stepping into a too-hot bath. Something was off. Our therapist, Dr. Jacob Finley, was this gentle-voiced, slightly scruffy guy in his early 40s. He had this way of making you feel like you were in good hands. He never interrupted, always nodded slowly. His office smelled like cedar and mint, and there was always soft jazz humming from a speaker in the corner. It felt safe. That word would haunt me later. I was waiting for Amy to finish her solo session so we could drive home together and pick up dinner. She was in there longer than usual. 45 minutes turned into over an hour. Olivia had already fallen asleep in the back seat when Amy came out. Her hair was a little messy. Her cheeks were flushed. I didn't think anything of it. She smiled when she saw me. We talked through some really heavy stuff, she said, rubbing her temples. All good? I asked. She nodded and kissed me on the cheek. Better than I expected. I remember feeling hopeful in that moment. I even texted my buddy Greg that night and said, I think we're finally making progress. Amy's opening up more. I was so far from the truth. I feel sick now just thinking about it. We started therapy with Dr. Finley 6 months before that day. At first, it felt like it was helping. Amy had always been someone who closed off when things got hard. I tried to talk to her about how I felt, like I was walking on eggshells, like she was somewhere else entirely, and she'd either go cold or explode. But in those sessions, she cried. She admitted to feeling disconnected. She said she didn't know who she was anymore, that motherhood and marriage had swallowed her. I listened. I really listened. And for a while, I thought we were reconnecting. Dr. Finley encouraged us to do little things together again, go for walks without our phones, cook meals as a team, say one nice thing to each other before bed. It felt corny, but it helped. That's why I never saw it coming. 3 weeks after that rainy Tuesday, I was using Amy's laptop while mine was updating. She was in the shower, and I needed to email our contractor about a leaky pipe in the basement. As I opened her email, logged in by default, a chat box popped up in the corner of the screen. Jacob Finley. My stomach dropped. I didn't want to read it. I told myself it was probably professional, maybe scheduling. But the preview of the latest message said, I'm still thinking about last Thursday. Your hands, your mouth, everything. I couldn't stop shaking after you left. My ears started ringing. I clicked the message. It was a string of emails, not just one. Dozens of them. Some short and vague, others disturbingly detailed. They started roughly 3 months ago, right when Amy insisted on doing separate sessions every other week. The emails weren't just physical. They were emotional, deep. He told her things like, you make me feel alive again, and I've never crossed this line before, but with you it doesn't feel wrong. Amy had responded just as passionately. She talked about how safe he made her feel, how he listened better than anyone ever had, how their connection was the most real thing in her life. I closed the laptop, sat in complete silence. I felt a coldness wash over me, like the entire room had been emptied of air. She came downstairs 10 minutes later, towel around her hair, smiling. She kissed me on the head. Thanks for checking in on the plumber. You're a lifesaver. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. I just said, we need to talk. Amy froze when I said those 4 words. Maybe it was the tone. Maybe it was how still I was, how my voice didn't shake. We need to talk. She looked at me like a kid caught sneaking out. There was a flicker of fear in her eyes, but only a flicker. Then she straightened up. What's going on? I reached for the laptop and opened the email app. I didn't have to scroll. Her inbox was still open. The message from Jacob, our therapist, was right there at the top, glowing in all its betrayal. I turned the screen toward her. No words. Just that one line. I'm still thinking about last Thursday. She stared at it, silent. Say something, I managed. My voice cracked. Amy didn't even pretend to be confused. She didn't ask what that was or try to play dumb. She just looked at the screen, then back at me, and whispered, "I'm sorry." That's what did it. Not a denial, not a defense. Just that quiet, pathetic apology. "How long?" I asked. She didn't answer. I stood up. "How long?" She closed her eyes. "Since January. 9 months. 9 months of lying. 9 months of pretending she was working on our marriage while she was screwing the one person I was supposed to trust in all of this. The one person we both had let into the most vulnerable parts of our lives. You brought him into our marriage," I said. "You cried in front of him. I cried in front of him. And you were screwing him." Amy was crying now. But I couldn't care. I couldn't even look at her. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said. "It was emotional first. He just understood me. He saw me. That made me laugh. A bitter, sharp laugh I didn't recognize as my own. He saw you." I snapped. "He charged us to see you. He's a therapist, Amy, not a soulmate. And you fell for it like some bored teenager." That hit her. She flinched. "I never meant to hurt you," she said, her voice trembling. "No. You just didn't care enough not to." That night I didn't sleep. I didn't stay in the house either. I drove to my brother's and sat in his driveway until 3 a.m. I couldn't bring myself to ring the doorbell. I didn't want to explain what had happened. It still didn't feel real. Eventually, I went back home. Olivia was still asleep. Amy had locked herself in the guest room. I didn't even say a word when I walked past her the next morning. I just stared at our daughter's cereal bowl and tried to remember what normal used to feel like. 2 days later, I reported Dr. Finley to the state board. I gathered every email, every message I could find. I even printed them all, dated them, organized them into a binder. I wasn't sure what kind of case I had, but I knew what he did was unethical. Worse than unethical, it was predatory. This man knew we were vulnerable. He used that. He waited until Amy started opening up to him, until she was dependent on his approval, and then he crossed the line. And she let him. The board took the complaint seriously, more seriously than I expected. They called me a week later asking if I'd be willing to testify if it came to a formal hearing. I said yes before the woman could finish the sentence. Amy didn't know yet. I hadn't told her, but that was about to change. The confrontation that followed was ugly. She screamed. I stayed cold. She said I was ruining his life. I said he ruined mine first. He helped me, she yelled. He saw the version of me that you refused to see. I said, "You mean the version of you that betrayed your husband and made excuses for it?" She didn't answer. She just cried. Later that night, she sent me a long message while I was in the other room. She said she was going to move in with her sister, that she needed time to figure herself out, that she was sorry, but not for loving someone else, just for lying. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I deleted it. The hearing date was set, and I was going to testify. I never imagined I'd be testifying in a disciplinary hearing for the man who was supposed to save my marriage. But there I was, sitting outside a sterile, beige conference room in a downtown office building, flipping through a binder full of emails I never should have seen. Emails between my wife and our therapist. Some romantic, some outright suggestive, all of them laced with betrayal. The state board's investigator, a no-nonsense woman named Ms. Kirchner, met me in the waiting area. She had seen this before, she told me. Not often, but enough to know how these cases usually go. The therapist rarely walks away with their license intact. They always think they're above the line, she said, until they cross it. Amy didn't show up. I didn't expect her to. But still, there was this part of me that hoped maybe she'd be there, that she'd see what this really was. That it wasn't just about love or lust or whatever she wanted to call it. This was about ethics, about power, about someone using trust as leverage. Instead, I sat there alone at the witness table, walking them through our sessions. How Jacob would make intense eye contact with her. How his tone shifted when we spoke about intimacy. How, over time, he encouraged us to do more solo sessions, claiming it would help individual healing. I told them about the emails, how I found them, how long it had been going on. Then I handed over the binder. I could see their expressions change as they flipped through it. No one spoke for a moment. The head of the panel, a gray-haired man with glasses, just shook his head. One of them asked, "Were you ever aware they had a relationship outside of therapy while it was happening?" I laughed bitterly. No. I was sitting 10 feet away from them, with my daughter in the back seat. I trusted him. I trusted her. They thanked me for coming in, said they'd be in touch. I walked out feeling hollow, not victorious, not angry, just drained. A week passed before Amy reached out again. She asked to meet at the park where we used to take Olivia when she was little. I hesitated, but I said yes. We sat on opposite ends of a bench. She looked tired, not sad, just worn out, like a kid who stayed out too late and didn't know how to explain it to her parents. "You really reported him," she said quietly. I did. Her eyes welled up. "They're going to revoke his license." "Good," I said. "He doesn't deserve it." There was a long silence between us. Kids played in the background. One of them laughed, and I flinched at how light it sounded. So different from everything I was feeling. "I was lonely," she said. "So was I replied. She turned to me. "You weren't unhappy like I was." "That's because I was trying," I snapped. "You were comparing me to someone paid to listen to you. Someone whose job it was to validate your feelings." "He made me feel seen," she whispered. "And I made you dinner. I cleaned up after our daughter. I sat on that damn therapy couch and poured my heart out while you were already sneaking around behind my back." Her face crumbled. I didn't know how to stop. I stood up. "You didn't want to." That night, she sent me a message. "If you ever forgive me, I'll be here. But I understand if you don't." I didn't reply. I didn't block her either. But I didn't forgive her. Not then. Maybe not ever. A month later, I got the letter from the board. Jacob Finley's license was officially revoked. Permanent. They cited gross ethical misconduct, abuse of power, and boundary violations. The final paragraph thanked me for coming forward. But I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a guy who had let the wolf into the house and didn't notice until it was too late. I didn't know Amy was going to fight for custody until the papers showed up on my doorstep. It had been 6 weeks since the hearing. 6 weeks since Jacob lost his license and disappeared from the public eye. 6 weeks since Amy moved into her sister's house across town and barely spoke to me, except for drop-offs and the occasional email about Olivia's school. I thought we were headed for a quiet, uncontested divorce. I thought maybe, just maybe, she felt guilty enough not to make things harder than they already were. Then I opened that envelope. She wanted primary custody. Not shared. Not joint. Primary. In black and white, her lawyer wrote that I was emotionally unstable and vindictive, and that Olivia would be better off in a more consistent home environment. My jaw dropped. I read it again. And again. It was like Amy had shape-shifted into a stranger overnight. This was the same woman who cheated on me with our therapist. The same woman who watched me cry in front of him while secretly screwing him in his office. And now I was the one who was unstable? I called my lawyer immediately. "I want to fight this," I told her. All the way. She warned me it would be ugly. That family court doesn't care about cheating unless it affects the child. That Amy's betrayal might mean nothing legally. I told her I didn't care. I needed them to know who she really was. The prep for the trial consumed my life. I dug through every message, every calendar invite, every instance I could prove that Amy prioritized her affair over her family. I showed how she skipped Olivia's school conferences to attend therapy appointments. I even found a receipt for a weekend retreat Jacob had hosted in Vermont, while Amy told me she was visiting her mom. My lawyer pieced together a narrative that made it clear Amy hadn't just made a mistake. She'd systematically checked out of her family while lying to both of us, and she dragged our daughter through it in the process. We subpoenaed Jacob. He never showed. His attorney sent a letter citing emotional distress and irreparable damage to his career. The judge didn't care. The judge wanted to hear from Amy, and when she took the stand, the mask finally slipped. She cried. A lot. She said she felt neglected, that I wasn't affectionate. She said she was vulnerable, and Jacob took advantage. But then she did something I didn't expect. She admitted, under oath, that she developed feelings for him during our marriage. When my lawyer asked, "Did you ever act on those feelings before separating from your husband?" she paused. Then she nodded. Yes. The courtroom was dead silent. I didn't smile. I didn't even blink. Inside, though, I felt something crack open, something I'd been holding shut for months. She had just burned her own bridge in front of a judge. After closing statements, we waited 3 weeks for the ruling. The judge awarded joint custody, but gave me primary residence. Amy would have weekends and one weeknight. Olivia would stay in her school, in the house she grew up in. I could see Amy clench her fists as the judge read the decision. She didn't look at me as we left. Not once. Later that night, Olivia crawled into my bed after a nightmare. She wrapped her little arms around me and whispered, "Don't let go, Daddy." And I didn't. I held her all night. I thought winning custody would bring some kind of peace. That once the trial ended, the noise would die down and I could finally take a breath. But the thing no one tells you is, when the battle ends, what follows isn't peace. It's silence. A strange, hollow quiet. Like when the power goes out in your house and you suddenly realize how loud the fridge used to be. Amy moved out of her sister's place and into a small apartment across town. She tried to decorate it for Olivia. Made a whole unicorn corner in the living room. Bought the same brand of cereal we had at home. But Olivia came back from her first weekend there quiet and clingy. "She doesn't listen when I say I miss you," Olivia whispered into my shoulder. "She says I shouldn't say that." I kissed her head and said, "You can always say that. Always." Amy and I barely spoke now. Just dry texts about school schedules and drop-off times. She didn't fight me anymore. But she didn't apologize again, either. It was like she had locked herself in a box and thrown away the key. Every time I saw her, she looked smaller, paler, like someone halfway through a sentence she couldn't finish. But I didn't reach out. I couldn't. Not after everything. One afternoon, about a month after the trial, Olivia brought home a drawing from school. It was one of those my family projects. She'd drawn 3 stick figures. Me, her, and Amy. But Jacob was there too. He was a red stick figure, standing off to the side. When I asked her who that was, she said, "That's Dr. Jake. Mommy said he's her friend." My throat tightened. "She talk about him a lot?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Olivia shrugged. "Not really. Just said he moved away, but they were friends." I felt like punching a wall. Instead, I just nodded. "Okay. Thanks for telling me." A few days later, I found myself typing his name into a search bar again. Jacob Finley. Nothing new. No photos, no articles, no updates. He had vanished. No social media, no new practice, not even a LinkedIn page. It was like he had scrubbed himself from the internet. But I found something on a therapist review site. A single review, posted 3 months before the hearing, from an anonymous user. The headline read, "He made me feel safe," until he didn't. It wasn't from Amy. The writing was different. Short sentences. Emotional. Raw. The user described how Jacob had blurred the line between therapist and friend, how he pushed boundaries under the guise of healing, how he eventually made her feel like she owed him something. It ended with, "If anyone else sees this, I hope you trust your gut sooner than I did." I stared at it for a long time. How many were there? That night, I stood in Olivia's doorway for a long time after she fell asleep, just watching her breathe, her stuffed bunny under one arm, her hair stuck to her cheek. She had no idea how close she came to a life built on lies. And I wasn't going to let that happen. Not now. Not ever. Life didn't go back to normal. It just reshaped itself into something else. Something quieter, sharper. I became the kind of dad who overpacks for field trips, who sits in the front row at every school recital. The kind of man who double-checks locks before bed, not because of fear, but because of control. I needed control. After everything Amy and Jacob took from me, I needed to hold on to whatever pieces were left. Amy's contact with Olivia became routine, predictable. Drop-offs on Fridays, pickups on Sundays. We rarely saw each other. When we did, it was brief, polite, chilly, but there were little cracks. Olivia would come home and say things like, "Mommy doesn't smile as much anymore," or, "She sleeps a lot during the day." And once, she cried when I told her I liked being home more. That one stuck with me, because deep down, despite the anger, despite everything she'd done, I knew Amy loved Olivia. I knew the affair didn't change that. But love isn't always enough when you're broken. And Amy was broken. Maybe she always had been. Then, one Saturday morning in early March, I got a call. It was Amy's sister. I hadn't spoken to her since the trial. She sounded panicked. "Amy's in the hospital," she said. "They think it was an overdose." I I don't know how bad it is yet. I froze. Everything around me slowed. The walls. The sound of the dishwasher. Even Olivia's cartoons in the other room. I didn't say anything at first. Then, where is she? She gave me the hospital name. I didn't tell Olivia what was going on. I called my neighbor and asked her to watch her for a few hours. Then I drove, barely blinking, all the way to County General. Amy was in recovery when I got there. Pale. Tubes in her arm. Oxygen in her nose. She looked like a shell. Her sister sat in the corner, wiping tears from her cheeks. They said it was Ambien and wine, she whispered. She told them she wasn't trying to hurt herself, just trying to sleep. But we both knew what that meant. I sat down beside the bed and just stared at Amy. She didn't open her eyes. I didn't hold her hand. I just sat there. And after a while, she whispered, "You shouldn't be here." "You're right," I said. "But I am." She turned her head, slowly. "I didn't want to die," she said, tears sliding down her temples. "I just wanted to stop feeling like I ruined everything." I couldn't say she didn't, because she had. But I didn't say that. I just looked at her and asked the one thing I'd never dared to ask. "Why him, Amy? Why Jacob?" She let out a shaky breath. "Because he made me feel like I wasn't disappearing." That answer hit harder than I thought it would. Not because it justified anything, but because it was probably the truth. She was held under observation for 2 more nights. When she was released, she didn't go home. She went to a clinic, voluntarily. Her sister made the arrangements. I stayed out of it. Olivia didn't know the details. Just that Mommy needed some help to feel better. And that seemed to be enough for her. For now. For the next few weeks, I moved like someone walking through water. Every moment felt heavier than it should. I kept waiting to feel relief, or justice, or some sense of closure. But all I felt was this low ache in my chest. Like grief. Except the person I was grieving was still alive. Still breathing. Just gone in every way that used to matter. 3 weeks after Amy checked into the clinic, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. No return address. Just her looping handwriting on the envelope. Inside was a 3-page note. I didn't open it right away. I held it in my hand for almost an hour, sitting at the kitchen table while Olivia napped upstairs. There was a part of me that didn't want to know what was inside. That thought, let it stay sealed. Let this be the last thing you never read. But I opened it. Her writing was shaky but familiar, like muscle memory from a time before everything broke. "David, if you're reading this, I hope it's not because I've made things worse. I hope it's because you still care enough to hear me. I've been in therapy every day. And no, not the kind Jacob pretended to offer. The real kind. The kind where they don't let you lie to yourself. They told me to write letters to the people I've hurt. You're the first. Because you were the one I hurt most. I see that now more clearly than I ever could before. What I did with Jacob was disgusting. It was selfish. It wasn't some story of forbidden love. It was a collapse. A total collapse of everything I was supposed to be for you. And for Olivia. I kept telling myself it was about being seen, about being understood. But what it really was escape. I didn't want to face the real work. I wanted someone to tell me everything I felt was okay without ever asking me to be better. You never stopped asking me to be better, and I resented you for it. But now, I think it was because you still believed I could be. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I don't deserve that. But I want you to know I'm trying now. Not for you. Not even for Olivia. For me. Because for the first time in a long time, I want to be someone who deserves the life I had. Thank you for protecting our daughter when I couldn't protect anything, not even myself. I'm so sorry, David. Amy. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. I didn't cry. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't even feel angry anymore. What I felt was tired, not defeated, not bitter, just worn out. Like I'd spent months trying to hold my life up on my shoulders, and someone had finally told me I could put it down. I didn't write her back. Not then. Instead, I took Olivia to the zoo the next day. Just the 2 of us. We shared a soft pretzel and watched the sea lions swim in lazy loops. She laughed. A big, goofy, belly laugh. I hadn't heard that sound in weeks. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I laughed too. Amy stayed in the clinic for 6 weeks total. She completed her program. Got a new therapist. One vetted and licensed, and, most importantly, not predatory. She asked to start slow with Olivia again. Weeknight visits first. Always supervised. I agreed. Not for her. For Olivia. Because my daughter still loved her mother. And that mattered more than what I felt. After her time in the clinic, Amy was allowed supervised visits with Olivia. She was quiet, cautious, like she knew she'd burned every bridge but still hoped for a way back across. Olivia slowly warmed up to her, but the bond they once had, it wasn't the same. I built something new, day by day. Work, school pickups, bedtime stories. My daughter and I became a team. Some nights, the weight of it all would sneak up on me, but not the way it used to. The grief wasn't for Amy. It was for the life we were supposed to have. Then I got the final letter from the licensing board. Jacob Finley's license permanently revoked. He'd vanished after the ruling. No practice. No trace. Just gone. And honestly, good. One night, after tucking Olivia in, she asked, "Daddy, why does Mommy get sad when I leave her house?" I took a deep breath. "Because she made a big mistake," I said. "And sad means she knows it mattered." She thought about that for a second, then hugged me hard. "I'm glad I live with you." I didn't say anything. I just held her tighter. Trust isn't something you fix. It's something you either protect or lose forever. But sometimes the greatest victory is simply surviving the wreckage with your soul intact.